Morning, 7th graders. Today is our study day, and I'm just going to go over a couple things I want to make sure we know for our test. Starting with solving equations. So remember, our purpose for equations is to figure out what our variable stands for. And in order to do that, we have to get it all by itself down here at the bottom. And the way we do that is we undo our equation, which means we do the opposite of what our equation is telling us to do. So how do we start with this equation to solving for our variable n? We know that this is positive 17, so we're going to subtract that from both sides so we can get rid of it. Now we're going to simply we have 22 left, right? Yeah. So now we have our variable divided by 6. A number divided by 6 equals 22. So what are we going to do next? This is saying division, right? So we have to do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 6. Remember, this is the same as saying 6 over 1, so we can cancel this out. So all we have left is our variable n, which is what we want. Now all we have to do is go 22 times 6, which would be, get that in your head, 132. All right? And we've solved for our variable n, all right? Our next thing is scientific notation, writing numbers in scientific notation. Remember, that's how we can express larger numbers using less digits and shrinking them down and multiplying them by a power of 10. So we have two numbers up here on the board. So remember, if we're working with decimals, our exponent always needs to be negative in our answer, all right? So remember, we move our decimal point till there's one non-zero digit to the left, all right? So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. All right here there's one non-zero, it's not a zero, digit to the left. So we write 4.5 times, we moved it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So we're going to take it times our power 10 to the negative 4th power. All right, what about this one? Remember, in these numbers, whole numbers like this, our decimal is understood to be right here. So we're going to move it till there's one non-zero digit to the left. So we're going to go 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that where we stop? No, we keep going, right? Because we're going to the left. We got to go one more. So we're going to write 5, 0, 2 times 10, to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Remember, when we're working with positive numbers, we're going to have a positive exponent, all right? All right, and be sure you read over lesson 7, your 24-hour digit times. Be sure you read over that lesson, familiarize yourself with how to convert between 24-hour time and 12-hour time and how that works. I have a number up here on the board. If I'd say 2,220 minutes, how would we write that in the 12-hour time format? So remember, if we're writing in 24-hour time format, after we get to noon, we start with, when we get to 1 o'clock, we actually say 13. Then we go 14, 15, 13. Can't even count anymore. And then when we get up to 22, so 22 would be, how would we write that in 12-hour time format? So 24 would be midnight, right? So we're just 2 hours less than that. So we write it as 10:22 or 20 p.m. All right. So read over that lesson. Make sure you're familiar with working with those. All right. And I know some of us were having some trouble with our combining integers. So I'm just going to quickly go over those as well. So I'm going to start with multiplication and division. So with multiplication and division, our rules are pretty simple. We simply have, if we have a negative number times a positive number, if they have opposite signs, our answer is going to be negative. If we have negative 5 plus 6, our answer is going to be negative 30. When we're working with multiplication and division, if they're opposite signs, it's going to be negative. All right? If they're the same signs, they're going to be positive. So if you have 5 times 6, you're going to have positive 30. If you have negative 5 times negative 6, notice we have the same signs, so our answer is going to be positive, all right? So So remember, with multiplication and division, combining your integers, if you have same signs, it's going to be positive. If you have opposite sides, it's going to be negative, all right? All right, so now let's go over our rules for adding integers. So if we're adding the same signs, we simply add the numbers and we keep the same sign. So if we have 6 plus 6, it's going to equal 12, right? If we have negative 6 plus negative 6, we're going to have negative 12, right? So we keep our same sign if we're adding our integers, all right? If we're adding different signs, so we're still adding, but we're adding two separate signs. So for instance, we have negative 7 plus 6. So when we're adding different signs, we can ignore our signs, so we can ignore whether they're positive or negative, and we just find the difference between the two numbers. So we're just going to subtract, right? So our difference between the number is 1, right? So after we find the difference in the number, we use our sign of the larger number. Which one's larger, 7 or 6? 7 is right, and our larger number is negative, so our answer is going to be negative, all right? So that's addition. All right, and if we are working with subtraction with our integers, we simply change to adding the opposite. So if we have, let's say we have 6, right? Or let's say we have 7. And we're subtracting negative 8, okay? So if we're subtracting, we simply change to adding the opposite. If we're subtracting our integers, we're just going to change to adding the opposite, which is going to make this 15, all right? So we change, if we're subtracting, we change to adding the opposite. All right, and the last thing I'm going to go over is lesson 8, graphing linear equations. Read over that, and so when we're doing this, we're going to have our table of values, and they're going to give us our values for x that we substitute into our equation, and then we solve our equation to solve for our coordinates that we then place on our grid. So for instance, if they give us the equation, let me just quickly find one here. They give us this equation, 2x plus 3 equals y. They give us our table of values over here and then our coordinates over here. So let's say our x values are 0, 1, and 2. And we want to find out what our y value is. So we simply just substitute, this is our x value, and we substitute our 0 to solve our equation. So we have 2 times 0, because remember this means same as times, plus 3 equals y. 2 times 0 is 0 plus 3. So we have 3 equals y. And then we know our value for our y value for our first coordinate. Then we do the same thing, but we substitute it with a different number, which is our different value for x. So we're going to go 2 times 1 plus 3 equals y. 2 times 1, which would be 2 plus 3 is y, 5 equals y, and then we have 5 right there. And to solve our last one, we substitute it with 2. We go 2 times 2 plus 3, 4 plus 3, y, 7 equals y. All right, then we've solved that, and then these are our coordinates that we then place on our grid, all right? So be sure you read over that, familiarize yourself with those, and study hard, guys. It's your last math test. I will see you guys tomorrow.